This world is awfully big. Girl, this time you're all alone. But it's time you started living. It's time you let someone else do some giving. Love is all around, no need to waste it. You can have it down, why don't you take it?
Hi, this is Gilbert Gottfried, and this is Gilbert and Frank's Amazing Colossal Obsessions with my co-host Frank Santopadre and our special guest, the great writer Bill Persky.
Bill, you're back.
I'm back.
I never so left. Fast.
And we should start, they were talking about 2016 as when all these people in show business were dying.
Yeah.
But boy, we've gotten off to quite a start.
Yeah.
Within like a 1 week period, 3 people that we should have had on the podcast.
Yeah.
Miguel Ferrer.
Yeah. Terrific actor.
And from a showbiz dynasty.
Yeah, his father was Jose Ferrer. His mother was Rosemary Clooney.
Yeah.
Yeah. And George Clooney's cousin.
Oh, yes,
Yeah.
yes.
Yeah.
And so, and a great actor in his own right.
Loved him in Twin Peaks.
Yeah, millions of movies. And, Mike Connors.
Mike Connors, Maddox. Did you ever work with Mike Connors, Bill, in your travels?
No, I watched it. I loved it.
Me too. We asked him to do the show back in 2014, and he was having surgery.
Oh.
He was having his knee replaced or something like that, and we didn't get to him.
Did you ever work with Miguel Ferrer?
No.
Yeah.
I worked with...
How about Mel Ferrer? How about Jose Ferrer?
I worked with Desi Jr. Desi Arnaz Jr. I worked with him. Does that count? Can I stay?
Not at all.
No. No.
Yes, you can stay, but no, it doesn't count.
Oh, okay.
And John Hurt.
Oh, and the great British actor, John Hurt.
Yeah. Best known as, I'm not an animal, I'm a human being.
It's a good impression. It's a pretty great movie.
Oh, yeah.
The Elephant Man.
Terrific movie from Mel Brooks.
Of all people, Mel Brooks. But the real reason that we're here with Billy doing this episode is to talk about the probably the most significant loss, which was Bill's old friend and colleague, the great Mary Tyler Moore.
Yep.
So we had you here, we had you coming in, we had you booked, and it seemed like it just made sense to have you come in and talk about your old pal.
Yeah. She was so special in so many ways. There were very few people at the funeral, and I was really honored that I was included. And so many of them were people from hospitals that were doing research on diabetes. She had given so much of herself to, they said if there is ever a serum, we will call it the Mary Tyler Moore serum. She raised, I think, $3 billion or something like that for diabetes. And
it's incredible.
And then there were other people who talked there. Grant Tinker's son, John Tinker, who is a wonderful writer himself, he was there, and he talked about when Mary married Grant, he had these 3 rambunctious kids, and how she incorporated them and how much she meant to them. And, he and his wife, through all of her illness, which was really bad the last couple of years, and they would come and see her they live in Alabama. She was so loved. I mean, and deservedly so. Deservedly so. I mean, the talent and the ability are one thing, but the person is another, and I got the luckiest thing. I mean, I spoke at the funeral.
Oh, you did?
Yeah.
Good for you.
And I said, I have known Mary Tyler Moore for 50 years. And been in love with her for 54 years. I was in love with her legs and her voice.
Richard Diamond.
Richard Diamond.
Yeah.
Yes.
And she was just splendid.
Do you remember meeting her for the first time?
Yeah. I was tongue-tied. because I'd been watching. We came on the show in the third
you
season,
and Sam.
so we'd already been fans and just in love with her like everybody in America. Every guy in America, that was his dream girl. I mean, when she did the movie with Robert Redford,
Ordinary People,
he wrote a piece about what it was to actually be with her, working with her and stuff. She did a scene. I mean, she did a lot of things, but one of the shows that we wrote specifically with her in mind as having the biggest part of it was the one called Coast to Coast Big Mouth.
Sure.
And it was that she had been on a quiz show and had blurted out that Alan Brady, who was Dick's boss, had a toupee. Which
recently
was
colorized and just aired it.
Yeah, that was on CBS recently.
Yep.
And it was like the worst thing that could have happened because Carl, who played Alan Brady, was the worst vicious human being. And the thought of what she had done and Dick was just, I mean, he was withering and shrinking. I'm shrinking. And so we wrote this scene that instead of Dick going and facing Alan Brady, she decided that she was going to go. And that was the thing about Mary as a person and as a performer. There was a power and a strength in her and a fearlessness in her that was also totally surrounded by femininity and girlishness in many ways. There's a difference, Anyway, the scene, she goes up to Carl's office, and Carl is at his desk with 5 styrofoam heads, each of which has a toupee.
You know that episode,
Oh,
Gilbert.
yeah.
It's a classic episode.
And it is to this day, it is listed in the 10 funniest scenes ever on television.
I came to apologize and to tell you personally that I'd like to try to explain.
Explain what? You got a big mouth.
I do, I know, Alan.
If you wanted a free rotisserie or a dryer, I would have gotten it for you. I would have gotten your house, a show place.
Oh, Alan, you don't have to do that. Alan, could I say something?
You got more to say?
Well, I've been thinking, Alan, well, for instance, I think you look very nice without your,
Hair?
Oh. Well, yes, and, well, for instance, now, I'm not saying this just because I'm in trouble, Alan, although goodness knows I am.
Oh, yes.
But believe me, sincerely, Alan, really sincerely, and you can ask anybody, I have always said that I like you so much better without your,
It's hair! You didn't have any trouble saying it on television.
God, she was so good in it. The way she started to talk and then backed off. And Alan, do you remember? I'm sure you remember, Alan. Maybe you don't. Can I remind you? And he'd say, talk to me. But she was just so wonderful.
How did she got that part? I mean, it's an interesting
Well,
story.
yeah, it is.
Danny recommended her?
Yeah,
because-
well, Danny interviewed her for his daughter, and they loved her. But what he
Danny
said,
Thomas.
Yeah, Danny Thomas. He said, "Who's going to believe that nose is related to this nose?"
Right. She used to say, miss that part by a nose.
Yeah.
Yeah. And
And
so
then
he
when they were doing the Van Dyke show, and they were having so much trouble finding who to play it, Danny said, "Remember the girl with the little nose? What was her name?" And they brought her in, and from the first time she walked in the door, that was it. She was Laura Petrie.
the little nose with the 3 names.
Yeah, Mary. The
Carl-
little nose with the 3.
Yeah, Carl likes to say that he picked her up by the head. He just he cupped her head and he said, "Come with me."
Come with me.
After
Yeah,
she did the
yeah,
read.
Yeah,
I guess
mean, there
to
was
bring
no,
her Sheldon.
there was no contact.
And
Well,
it's, oh, go ahead.
Go ahead.
No, I was just saying it's a funny thing because back then it was more innocent times.
Oh God, yeah.
No internet. You couldn't get, porno anytime you
Are you
wanted.
kidding? You couldn't. We had a show where we couldn't say the word pregnant.
Yes.
And Carl went to the network and said, why can we not say pregnant? And they said, because there are people who tell their children that babies come from the stork, and some who still tell them that babies are found behind cabbages. and you can't go into their home and bring up the subject of pregnant and have them ask what it is. And Carl said, those people do not deserve to have children or homes.
That's the perfect answer.
And I always thought afterwards, and when I do lectures and stuff, and I would say, now those children are faced with their children saying, what is a 4-hour erection? And what does it mean when the moment is right, you know? But it was very, very, well, you know the story about the double beds with Lucy and
oh yeah,
and that she put a single bed in the heart at the opening.
Oh,
yeah. Next time you see Lucy, there's a big double bed in the heart.
Because I was going to say, back then, I guess what was turning guys on the most was Mary Tyler Moore and the capri pants.
Oh, God, yes. And they said you can't wear them and you can't this. This network was horrified that she was wearing them.
And I think, we'll have to ask him when he comes on, Carl Reiner said they had a trouble with the censors saying that with her in those pants, there's some undercupping.
Undercupping.
Yes.
Right. There's also the famous story of Rob.
Oh,
when he
yes.
Came to
Rob
the
Reiner
set, young
grabbed...
Rob touching her tush.
Oh, yeah. She was so adorable. There will not be her like. After the Van Dyke show went off, everybody was looking for the next Mary Tyler Moore, and there wasn't going to be one. There was one of those. And Sam and I were doing a series, Good Morning World,
right?
And we were looking for the next Mary Tyler Moore, and a young girl came in to read, and she was all wrong for the lead of the show. But we said, you know what? You're not going to be the lead, but you're going to be her best friend. And she said, well, I read the script. There was no best friend. I said, that was before you came in, and that was Goldie.
Yeah, Goldie Hawn.
Goldie Hawn.
Yeah, you saw something in her, huh?
Well, stars are like that. I mean, another time we were reading people for a thing, and this young woman came in. She just arrived in L.A., and it was her first and second interview. And I said to her, you can have this part. And she was so excited. I said, but you shouldn't take it. And she said, well, why? I mean, it's a part. I said, well, you're going to be a superstar. And if you sign a contract to do this, you're going to be locked in, and we're going to end up not liking each other because you want to get out. She said, no, I want to do it. I said, well, I'll tell you what, this is Friday, and think about it over the week. Talk to your agent, tell him what I said. So she called on Monday, and she said, my agent and I decided not to take the part. I said, good. And that was Farrah.
Oh.
You just know.
Farrah
you
Fawcett.
Just know. Yeah, Farrah Fawcett. Yeah. But all Mary wanted to do was be a dancer and a singer on Broadway. That was no matter what else happened in her life, that would have been the joy.
Is that one of the reasons you guys wrote so many musical numbers?
Yeah,
for
because they both did. And the interesting thing is, she had a contract. They only did 5 years because Dick and Mary were sought after, and Carl were sought after by everybody, and they had done the show that Carl wanted to do. So Mary had a contract at Universal, and in film contract. And in the contract, she had the right of refusal for the films she did so that she could carefully build her career. The first thing she did was Thoroughly Modern Millie with Julie Andrews, and she played a supporting part, and she was terrific. And then they were doing a musical of Breakfast at Tiffany's, Abe Burrows was, and they wanted Mary for the part. And that was it. That's all she wanted in her life. So she went to the people at Universal, and they let her out if she would give up the option on choosing the movies because she had refused a number of them and stuff. So she gave them that. And then she went to do the show, which I saw her in Hartford, and she was fantastic. But the show really wasn't working, and it kept not working until when they got to New York, it was a total flop. It lasted 3 days. And back then, Broadway would not accept anyone from television. They were waiting for you. Nobody could get a good review. So the show was so awful, they blamed Mary for all of it. It was a very, very unfair but very destructive thing.
So she went from being red hot to being ice cold.
to Broadway. Well, a lot, maybe America didn't know what Broadway was, but in the business, she got blamed for everything. Then when she got back to Universal, they just pumped her into movies with Elvis Presley and
a change of habit.
Yeah, and they did movies. And by the time that was through, she had lost, it was 5 years, and she had lost the luster of she had before that. And Sam and I were doing one special a year for Dick Van Dyke. And I said to Dick, it's 5 years. Why don't we do a reunion with Mary? And he said, that'll be great. And then we also knew that it would be great showcase for her. And Dick was so generous. I mean, we wrote numbers specifically for her. It was really her show. And the day after that show went on the air, they called her and offered the series that became the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Dick Van Dyke and the other woman.
Dick Van Dyke and the other woman.
Right.
I still love it.
So you and Sam, and you're not saying it directly, but I'll say it. You and Sam, it could be argued, were
well. It was we were certainly instrumental in that happening. That all it did was give her a chance to be who she was after she had been away from that for a while.
But then she and Grant Tinker went and pitched the Mary Tyler Moore Show.
Yeah, and something that Mary didn't know until Sam and I did a show that was my favorite thing we ever did, called The Boys, and it was about two comedy writers that were us, and it was originally going to be Harvey Korman and Tim, but Harvey felt he was getting too identified with Tim and he wanted to do something that was old, so we had Herb Edelman come in and play it. And when people saw it, did you ever see it?
Yeah, you showed it to me at your house.
It was
real good. We watched it with Leopold.
Yeah, and everybody who was sending in pilots said, well, why bother? This is it. And it didn't get picked up. And it was the biggest disappointment in my life. And the reason it didn't get picked up is because the testing in front of an audience was very bad. And we were walking around and couldn't understand it. And Grant Tinker said, Mary's testing, the show, was the worst testing you've ever seen. They hated Rhoda. They hated Mr. Grant.
Oh, they said he was too angry.
They hated everything, and they were going to buy the show out. She had been guaranteed 26 shows, and they were going to buy it out just because they said it's not going to work. And Grant said, no, we're doing the show. And they had never shown Mary the testing until this had happened. And she said, well, now we can show you what your show tested like. And it turned out, about 5 years later, I got a call one night from a guy who had worked in the research department. He was drunk, and he said, Bill, it's taken me 5 years to tell you this, but the guy in charge of testing lied about your show's testing because he didn't like you and Sam. I won't mention his name.
Wow.
But back to Mary, because this is not about me. What was wonderful was when she moved to New York, and I was the only real friend she had. I mean, New York was waiting for her like they would have given her the city.
I didn't know she was from Brooklyn originally.
Yeah.
Yeah, Ocean Parkway.
Yeah, and she came to New York, and she got an apartment, and she was invited to everything. And I took her. I mean, I was like her friend taking her. And then people started to say, are you having a relationship with Mary Tyler Moore? And I'd say, no. And then after a while, it sounded, well, why not? It makes me sound pretty terrific. But at any rate, we went everywhere. And my three closest friends, closest friends and I rented a house every summer out in the Hamptons. And Mary decided she wanted to rent. So she went out, and she and Hope Lang rented a house together. And they would come over to our house, and we would play Dictionary, and we would play all kinds of games. And we spent this incredible, wonderful summer together. And we had all our kids with us, so there were like 12 of us. And she and Hope gave a party. And we went over in 3 vans, and the kids walked in, and they had this beautiful buffet, and it was gone. Locusts came through, and then there was nothing to eat. We had to go out and get more food.
I was sorry that her later shows didn't work out. After the Mary Tyler Moore show, she did so many attempts at new shows.
Well, I have to tell you, she decided she wanted to do a variety show.
She did the one with Letterman. And
but I did
Dick Shawn.
I did a special that led to that show.
Okay, Mary.
No, it was Mary Tyler Moore and How to Survive the 70s.
Right, okay.
And her guests were Bill Bixby and Harvey Korman and John Ritter. And Dick played a part with her, which, was so wonderful. It was about relationships, which were part of the 70s, finding a relationship. And Harvey did the introduction, and he said, relationships take forever, or they can happen in a moment. And we did a thing where she is on an elevator and Dick gets on the elevator. And in 8 floors, they fall in love with each other. We never rehearsed it, maybe once. It was magical. And then when they got out of the elevator, there's a woman waiting for him and a man waiting for her, and they hug their people and kind of wink at one another. But the two of them together were just...
Well, and their chemistry in the thing you and Sam wrote, the Dick Van Dyke and the Other Woman, it's just great.
Yeah,
I wish it was available.
Yeah, it was. There was... Well, one of the things, because of Mary's dancing that we did a dance number at a ski lodge where everybody had a broken leg and were on crutches.
It's fun.
It was just... And the final thing was... They were the bride and groom on a wedding cake. We had this big wedding cake, and they were there, and she was so excited, and all he wanted to do was be on the cowboy cake over there or the football cake over there. And they had a real argument like a couple. And then it was the 5th year anniversary, and they had put the cake in the freezer and all, and it kept going at like the 20th and the 25th, and finally their 50th anniversary. And Mary's gown was tattered, and Dick's hat, the top was off, and everything. It was just perfect. And he was still being grumpy. And she said, "You never, ever once in all these years told me that you love me." And he said, "Well, yeah." And then they sang "Do You Love Me" from Fiddler on the Roof. It was, it was just unbelievable. And it was partially because of the two of them and the magic thing.
All-time chemistry.
That they created.
And they were really in love with each other in real life.
No. Dick at that time was not very available, and Mary said at one point when she first met Dick, he said, "Hi." And then when they were doing the special, he said, "Hi," and he cared deeply about her. But and she wasn't that available at that point either. But it hit him with her passing away, and and the respect they had for one another.
If you don't trust me like you should,
That's no good. If you won't take my best advice,
I'm not nice. If you don't say you think that I'm okay, that isn't any way to be.
what we need is good old harmony. 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 Imagine Minneapolis without St. Paul, it's harmony. That's all.
You know, people say the cliche is something you hear that beautiful women can't be funny.
Well, that's the thing.
She certainly.
They are the golden find in movies. If you found a beautiful Carol Lombard,
Yeah, sure.
was that,
Sure.
you know, and there are very few beautiful women who are funny.
She was certainly
And
one.
it's because they didn't need it as they were growing up, you know.
Katharine Hepburn's pretty funny in Bringing Up Baby.
Yeah.
But Mary Tyler Moore, you know.
And in the on the special, the second one, How to Survive the 70s, I interviewed this young writer. In fact, I took him out for sushi. And to this day, it was David Letterman. And he said, Bill Persky bought sushi for me for the first time. But he didn't want to do the show. But he ended up doing the series.
The
with her.
variety
The
show.
variety show.
Yeah.
He did it. And
Yeah.
Dick did it with her,
Dick,
too.
Dick Shawn was on it, and Swoosie Kurtz, and Michael Keaton.
Yeah.
Well, I was going to say, it was sad. I was rooting for her back then to get another
but,
series.
I got to tell you, on that show, the last thing we did was This Is the Rest of Your Life, Mary Tyler Moore. And we introduced people, you know, this is your fourth husband, Grant left. Yeah. You know, we just did all these things. And then we said, and this is so-and-so who was your boyfriend on Here Comes Mary, the series you did that didn't kind of work out. And then we do a couple more things and said, and here is your director from That Mary Again. And that you did 10 years. And we had all of these, Mary is coming, Mary, we love Mary. And then in your later years, at the age of 80, you try another one. And it's called There Goes Mary, in which you're only photographed from the back. And John Ritter, who was sitting next to her, you know, in the sketch, she said, have I no shame? And he said, apparently not. So she had a great sense of humor about herself.
She was a great straight actress, too.
I tell you, one of the great nights, I took her to Sammy's Romanian down on Rivington.
Drew told me to ask you that story.
Sammy's Romanian, which people don't know, was a Romanian restaurant, but a Jewish Romanian restaurant. It was down in a basement.
It's still there.
Yeah, it's
kind
still
of a dive.
there.
But...
And but I mean, it's a crazy place. I mean, and there's a violinist running
been there,
around
Gilbert.
and playing.
Yeah, you have a DJ.
As a matter of
klezmer music.
fact, Paul Schaefer was having a party there, and I was with him.
It's where Leopold had his roast.
Leopold's last night as a Jew was there.
That's right.
Yeah.
Before his conversion.
That's right. The famous last night.
We had a great party for him.
His last
night as a Jew party for Tom. But at any rate, it was like a dive, but it was famous and on the table, every table had a huge jar of chicken fat and a huge jar of pickles. And the steaks, Romanian steaks, are like a broiled tennis racket comes out on the plate. I mean, they're dripping over. Everything is fried, and it's this. And I said to Mary, let's go. We'll do it. So we went, and the door opened, and she was there, and it was a question of who was more in shock, them or Mary. But by the time it was over, she was covered in chicken fat. She was dancing with the violin. I mean, she just entered into whatever she did, you know. God, she was great.
Gifted actress, gifted serious actress, and funny.
And again, when she had her first apartment at the San Remo, she had the tower with the 360-degree view. And when it was finished, I was going over to have dinner with her. And I was going to take her out, but she said, let's just stay here. And I said, okay. And I said, well, how about Chinese food? She said, fine, but order enough for 3. And I said, oh, who's coming? She said, well, my mother had a little heart scare this week. And I took her to Mount Sinai, and there was this very nice young doctor there. And I'd like to invite him over. And that was Robert, who she married.
That's great.
So I was kind of on their first date with
That's
them.
great. Big loss.
It was kind of sad that for God knows how many years, because of the diabetes.
Yeah.
That it went on for years that like just about every other issue of a tabloid would be some depressing photo of her saying Mary's last tragic days.
Yeah, of course.
She also did a lot for animals. She did a lot for.
God.
She did a lot
she
for.
loved dogs.
She did a lot for
animals.
a lot of people.
She and Betty White, who was one. Bernadette Peters is, I think, her best friend. With Betty White and Bernadette Peters were her best friends. But she never took herself seriously, but was totally in charge.
That's nice.
You know what I mean? She when she knew something wasn't right for her. And when we were rehearsing for the special, and there was a dance number, because everyone was jogging in the 70s, so we had a dance number that was on a track, like around the lake in Central Park. And the whole dance number was the dancers running while they were dancing, but they were doing conga dance, all kinds of things. And at one point, she wasn't in the thing. It was a little change. And we were in the rehearsal hall, and it was a hot day, and I was sitting there drinking a beer, and she came over and slid in and took a sip of the beer, and she said, "Billy, how lucky are we?"
That's nice.
She always knew.
That's nice.
She always knew.
Mr. Gottfried?
I'm sorry, I wasn't paying attention. Yeah.
He forgets to host.
Yes.
That's sweet, Bill, and thanks for coming here and sharing that stuff.
Yeah.
And sharing your memories. I tell you, people should look, not only people know about Ordinary People. She's terrific in a comedy called Flirting with Disaster.
Yeah.
And with Robert Preston and Finnegan Begin Again, which I would urge people to but also a very accomplished dramatic actress.
Oh, yeah.
She really had range.
She did Whose Life Is It?
Yeah, she did Whose Life. She could really do anything.
Yep.
So, I'm Gilbert Gottfried, and this has been Gilbert and Frank's Amazing Colossal Obsessions with my co-host, Frank Santopadre. Once again, we're at Nutmeg, and our engineer, Frank Verderosa. And once again, God knows how many times this man has been on the show, and we're still only scratching the surface.
This is his fifth.
Yeah.
I brought a change of clothes.
That's fine.
Yeah.
It's like a game show.
So are you homeless or something?
Yeah, where's the shower?
Thanks for coming and talking about Mary, Bill.
Oh, it was good to do.
The great Bill Persky.
Thank you very much for inviting me.
Of course.